The wind was dry and rough. Dust blew across the broken street. Faded buildings stood like skeletons, half-eaten by time. The old trading zone hadn't seen real business in years. Most traders had moved on. Only a few stalls remained, and even they were dying. She sat on the ground, her back against a cracked wall, knees pulled to her chest. Her clothes were torn and thin, barely enough to cover her. Her feet were bare, her skin was dry, her lips cracked. Her hair hung over her eyes like a curtain, hiding the pain, the shame, the hunger. She didn't move. Not even when people passed by. Not when a cart rolled close and splashed mud across her legs. She just stared ahead, eyes dull and lifeless. It wasn't the first day she had been there. Some ignored her, some pretended not to see her. One or two had laughed at her. She had not laughed in a long time. The girl had once begged for food. She had cried for help. No one had listened. Now she was quiet. Her voice was gone, buried with the hope she once had. All she had left were her clothes, and even they were falling apart. That morning, she had tried to trade a piece of cloth for a half-eaten fruit. The seller pushed her away. She fell in the dirt. Her hands shook as she stood back up. Her body was weak, thin like a shadow. Still, she didn't give up. She walked to another stall and pulled at her shirt. The cloth slid down her shoulder. Her hope was clear. She didn't say a word, but her meaning was loud. The vendor didn't even look up. She turned back, stepped away, and sat again at her usual spot near the corner wall. That was when she saw him. A man was walking across the broken street. He looked different. He was human. His clothes were plain but not dirty. A bag hung over his shoulder. He had a calm face, but his eyes were sharp, like someone who noticed everything. She lowered her head. She had seen humans before. Some were kind, most were not. She had learned not to expect much. But still, something told her to watch. He stopped near a stall, asked a few questions, then walked again. Then, for some reason, he turned and looked straight at her. Her heart jumped. She quickly looked down. Maybe he would pass like the rest. Maybe he would laugh, or worse. She didn't want to guess. She had nothing left to offer, but his steps came closer. He stopped in front of her. She didn't look up. Her arms pulled tighter around her legs. "You hungry?" he asked. His voice was quiet but clear, not rough, not mocking. She blinked, slowly, her head tilted. Just enough to see him better. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small food bar. It was simple rations, dry, tasteless, but it was food. He didn't throw it at her. He didn't drop it on the ground. He knelt down and held it out with his hand open. She stared at the food, then at him. Her fingers moved slowly. She took the bar, holding it like it was gold. She wanted to speak, to say thank you, but her throat was dry. Nothing came out. She just nodded, then looked away. He didn't move. Oh. He watched her tear the wrapper with shaking hands. She bit into it, chewing slowly. She didn't care about the taste. It was the first real food she had touched in days. After a minute, he stood again. She thought he would walk away. Instead, he asked, "Do you have a place to sleep?" She shook her head. He looked around, then back at her. "Can you walk?" Nodded barely. He didn't ask anything more, just turned and said, "Come with me." She stared at his back. Her fingers still clutched the half-eaten bar. Her legs were weak. Her heart beat fast. This could be a trick. It could be dangerous. But her other choice was to sit and fade. So she stood up. She followed him, not because she trusted him yet, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had seen her, spoken to her, and offered something without asking for anything. First, she didn't know his name. He didn't ask for hers. But as the dust blew behind them, the empty market faded, her steps grew just a little stronger, and for the first time in forever, her eyes held something new. Not hope. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The town was silent at night. Only the wind whispered through broken windows and rusted signs. Power had long vanished from this place. The stars above looked down on ruins and ghosts. But in a small alley near the edge of town, a single light flickered. The human's camp lantern. He had set up near an old structure, close to where he found her. It was safer there, away from the scavenger gangs that still roamed the dark corners. His backpack sat beside him, opened with tools scattered across a metal sheet. He was trying to fix a transmitter, not for rescue, but for trade. "We're steady," his eyes focused. Then he heard the soft sound, not a voice, not footsteps, just a small shift of movement, like someone trying not to be heard. He turned slowly. She was there, the same alien girl from the day. The same torn clothes, bare feet, and empty eyes. She stood at the edge of the light, not daring to step closer. Her body was tense, like a wild animal, unsure if it should run or stay. He didn't speak. He didn't reach for a weapon. He just looked at her, and then, without a word, shifted to the side and tapped the ground next to his pack. She waited. 5 long seconds, then 6 more. Finally, she stepped into the light. She didn't sit close. She dropped beside the corner of the wall, where shadows still covered half her face. Her arms were wrapped tight around her knees again, her back to the stone. He reached into his bag and tossed another food bar toward her. It landed gently near her feet. She grabbed it fast, but she didn't eat right away. Instead, she stared at it, then at him, confused. She whispered, "You gave me one already." He shrugged, keeping his eyes on the transmitter. "You looked hungry again." She opened the bar and ate slower this time, watching him between each bite. Her body was still ready to run, but her mind was waking up. Something about him didn't make sense. Finally, she asked, "Why?" He looked up. His face was calm. "Why? What? Why help me?" He didn't answer right away. He leaned back, cracked his neck, and looked at the night sky. Then he said, "Because I've been hungry too." She said nothing, not for minutes. She just sat in silence, processing the words. She had heard many voices in her life, cold ones, angry ones, voices that used her or laughed at her. This one was ... different. The wind blew again. Carrying the cold, he noticed her arms trembling. He reached into his gear and pulled out a folded thermal wrap, worn but still warm, tossed it to her side. She stared at it, then at him, then back. At the wrap, she didn't take it. Instead, she asked something she hadn't said in a long time. "Can I stay?" His answer was simple. "For tonight?" "Yes." She nodded slowly, pulled the wrap close, and wrapped herself tight in it. Curled into the corner, her body still tense, but her eyes finally closing. He watched her for a few seconds, then returned to his tools. But what he didn't see, ... was the tear that slipped down her cheek. Not from sadness, not from fear, but from the strange feeling that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible anymore that night. She slept without chains. Without fear of hands grabbing her in the dark. She slept with real warmth, and near someone who didn't look at her like she was broken or used. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what he wanted, but he had looked at her, really looked, and had not turned away. That was something new. That was something rare. Morning came with a strange stillness. The sky was pale gray, and the sun barely touched the broken walls of the ghost town. He packed his tools in silence, tied the last strap on his bag, and stood. I hadn't expected her to still be there, but she was curled beneath the thermal wrap, sitting upright, fully awake and watching him. He didn't say anything. She didn't ask anything. But when he turned to walk, she rose and followed. No shoes, no bag, just quiet steps behind. His. He noticed the soft pattern of her movement. Always 3 steps behind, never beside him. Like she was trained to stay back, to stay small, to not be noticed. He stopped by a collapsed market sign. She stopped too. He looked over his shoulder. "Are you following me?" She nodded. Still no words, just a silent answer in her eyes. He sighed. Not with anger, but with the weight of knowing this wasn't simple. He could have told her to go. He could have said, "I don't need this." He could have walked faster and disappeared into the ruins. But he didn't. He adjusted his pack and said, "Fine, But if we get shot at, you hide. Got it?" She nodded again. They walked. Hours past. The land opened into dry fields filled with broken machines. Metal bones of farming bots rusted under the dull sun. They passed. No people, no voices. Just wind. And sometimes the cry of a scavenger bird. She said nothing the entire time, until they reached an old transport station. Half the roof had fallen in, but part of it was still safe. He pushed open the door and tossed his gear inside. She stood at the edge, unsure. "Come in," said. She stepped in and sat near the wall, just like before, arms tight around her legs. Eyes watching everything. He cooked something this time, real heat, a cracked pan, a few scraps of preserved meat and roots. She sniffed the smell like it was a dream. Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't ask. He handed her a tin bowl. She took it like it might vanish. She didn't eat fast. She ate like someone who knew what it meant to run out. When the meal was done, he leaned back against a crate and looked at her carefully. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked down, then whispered, "They didn't give me one." His brow lowered. "No name?" She shook her head. He paused, then nodded. "All right. Then for now, I'll call you Shadow since you don't speak and you move like one." She looked up, her lips parted. No smile, but something close. He didn't expect what happened next. She crawled forward, slowly, and stopped right beside him. She placed her hand on his boot gently, then whispered, "You can use me if that's what you want." He froze. Not out of shock, but because she meant it. There was no hesitation in her voice. No fear, just quiet submission, as if it was normal, as if that was how she survived before. He looked away, clenched his jaw, and didn't speak for a long moment. Finally, he whispered, "I'm not like them." She didn't understand what that meant yet. He reached over, pulled the blanket from his bag, and dropped it in her lap. "Rest. That's all I want from you tonight." She stared at him, confused, silent, then slowly wrapped herself in the blanket, crawled back to her corner, and laid down. She faced him, watching. Not with fear now, but with something new in her eyes, something unsure, something questioning. Could kindness be real? Could safety be this simple? She didn't know. But she was still here, still following. Him, still alive, and that was more than she had dared to hope for. Rain began falling before sunrise. Cold and thin, it slipped through the broken roof and tapped gently on the metal floor. He was already awake, boiling water over a small heater. He didn't say anything when she stirred. She sat up slowly, her thin arms wrapped around her chest. Her blanket was damp. Her hair clung to her neck. The fire's warmth called to her, but she didn't move closer. Not yet. He poured a small metal cup and held it out. "Hot, drink slow." She hesitated, then took it with both hands. The steam touched her face. Her nose twitched. The smell of something warm felt unreal. She sipped carefully, and her eyes widened. It wasn't just hot, it was sweet. It was the first time she tasted something made just for her. He watched without a word. After she drank half, she looked at him and asked, "Why are you really helping me?" He leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. "Because I can." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't believe that answer. She set the cup down, stood slowly, and began to unwrap the outer layer of her clothes. He looked away, but her voice stopped him. "Look." He turned his head slightly and saw them. Scars across her back. Thin ones. Deep ones. Burned brand near. Her side, marks that told a long, quiet story. One filled with chains, whips, and cages. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She just stood there, dare enough to reveal the truth. Then slowly pulled her shirt back on. "I was taken when I was small," she said softly. "Sold, trained. I never had a name, never had a choice. They said I was property." He clenched his fists. He had seen slavery before, heard stories in the outer colonies, but never this close. Never this personal. "I escaped 2 years ago," she continued. "Been running since. No one ever helped. No one looked at me unless they wanted something." She stepped closer now, her voice steadier than before. "I followed you because you saw me, but I don't know how to repay. That, I only know one way." He met her eyes and said clearly, "Then forget everything they taught you. With me, you don't have to repay anything." Her lips trembled. She looked down, but he wasn't finished. "You want to stay? Then eat, rest, heal. That's enough." Her hands tightened at her sides. Her body shook, not from cold, but from a feeling she hadn't felt in years: safety. She walked to her corner, picked up the blanket, and sat by the fire. She didn't ask more questions, didn't push, but her eyes stayed on him, full of silent thoughts. He gave her space, he gave her silence, and most of all, while she gave her time. That night, while she slept, he sat near the entrance with his rifle. Across his lap, he didn't sleep, because deep in his gut, something was wrong. Her scars weren't just from the past. Someone had branded. Her "and" brands meant ownership, which meant someone might still be looking for her, and if they came, they would not leave alive. Night fell heavy across the wasteland. The stars blinked behind thin clouds, and the air turned sharp and dry. Their fire had burned down to glowing embers. She was asleep, curled in the blanket, finally breathing deep and calm. He sat near the door, rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the shadows outside. He wasn't just being careful. He felt that the silence wasn't right. The wind had stopped. The birds were gone. Something was coming, and it wasn't just weather. He stood slowly, walked a few steps beyond the shelter, and scanned the darkness. His boots crunched softly over old rust and stone. In the distance, where the road split into dead tracks, he saw it: fresh tracks. Boots, not his, not hers. He followed the trail with his eyes. 3 prints, no vehicle. On foot, heavy, spaced out like patrol movement. The slavers had found her scent. He went back inside. She woke as he entered. One look at his face. She sat up fast. "What's wrong? Someone's coming," he said quietly. 3 men, not close yet, but they're tracking something. Pulled the blanket tighter. Her breath quickened. "How do you know it's them?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to, she already knew. She grabbed her small satchel, barely anything inside, and stood. "Should we run?" "Not yet," he said. "They're not close enough to see us. But if they're who I think they are, running won't help. We make a stand or disappear deep into the zones." Her voice dropped. "They won't stop," he said, loading the rifle. "But neither will I." She watched him move. His hands were steady, his voice calm. He wasn't panicking. He was preparing for her. No one had ever done that, ever. She stepped closer. "I don't want to be taken again." "You won't," he replied. They left the shelter before the moon reached its peak, moved carefully through the ruins. He guided her through broken stairwells and under fallen towers. Every few minutes, he stopped to listen. Once, she grabbed his arm, her eyes wide, voices far behind them, rough, confident, laughing, the kind of voices that belonged to men who thought they already owned what they were hunting. He looked at her. "We need higher ground." They climbed to a broken rail station, its roof half gone, but its walls still strong. From there, he could see the dust trail in the dark, faint, but moving fast. "They've got sniffers," he said. She swallowed hard. "They'll find us not. If we send them the wrong way." He unpacked a flare, cracked it open, and tossed it far to the west, near the wreckage of a supply truck. It burst with red light and hissed loudly. "Fly!" In seconds, the voices behind them changed direction. They took the bait. But only for now. He turned to her. "We've got 1 hour. After that, they'll circle back." She nodded. "I know a place. Deep inside the rusted zone. They won't follow there." "Why not?" "Because last time, one of them went in and never came back." That was enough. They moved again, fast but careful. Through dust, through silence, through danger that never slept. And in every step she took, her fear began to shift. It wasn't gone, but beside him, it no longer controlled her. He didn't just fight for her. He moved like someone who knew she mattered. By the time they reached the edge of the rusted zone, her legs burned and her breath was short, but she didn't ask to stop. Not now. Behind them, far in the dark, the voices returned, and they were louder, angrier, closer. He turned his rifle toward the sound, raised one hand for her to stay behind. Her voice was low but clear. "I can fight too." He looked back at her, the girl who had once sat silent in the dust, who had offered herself in fear, would believe she had no worth. Now she stood, barefoot in the ruins, with fire in her eyes. "No," he said. "You. Don't fight tonight," she frowned. "You survive." He gave her a small nod and raised the rifle as the first shadow stepped into view. The sun had not yet returned. Only gray light touched the edge of the ruins. Smoke still drifted near the broken pillars where the fight had ended. He sat on the ground, holding his shoulder. Blood soaked part of his sleeve. His rifle lay beside him, still warm. One man had escaped, the others didn't get the chance. Their bodies now rested in the dust, silent and still. She crouched beside him with a ripped cloth in her hands. Her fingers pressed against the wound gently, careful not to hurt him more. "You shouldn't have protected me like that," she whispered. "I don't protect people because I should," he said. "I do it because they matter." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Instead, she kept cleaning the blood, pressing down until it stopped. Then she did something strange. Something she hadn't done in years. She smiled. It was small, soft, unsure, but it was real. He noticed his lips twitched just slightly. "What's that look for?" She looked away quickly. "Nothing, just, I don't remember the last time I felt like this. Safe." She shook her head, alive. They stayed there for a while. He rested. She watched over him. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of fire and metal. But it didn't feel cold anymore. When he tried to stand, she helped, her arms wrapped around his waist, steady and strong. Together they walked into the inner zone, deeper into a part of the ruins even the slavers feared. Strange machines from the old war stood half buried in ash. Long wires hung from towers that no longer hummed. "This place used to scare me," she said. "It should," he replied. "Not now," she added. "Not while I'm with you." They found shelter inside a hollow transport pod sealed tight by time. He broke open a ration can. She lit a small fire from scrap and dry cloth. As they ate side by side, she looked at him and asked the question that had been growing inside her for days. "Why didn't you take me when I offered myself?" He finished chewing before answering. "Guess I didn't want something given in fear." She looked at the ground. "I thought that's all I had." "You were wrong." She didn't cry. She just sat there, quiet, letting his words sink into places no one had ever touched inside her. That night, when she lay beside him in the corner of the pod, she didn't stay curled tight in fear. She laid close to him, resting her head near his side, not because she was cold, but because she chose to be there. And when he wrapped an arm around her gently, she didn't flinch. She smiled again, the kind of smile that meant healing had started slow but real before. Sleep took her. She whispered something she had never said to anyone in her life. "Thank you for seeing me, not as a slave, not as a thing, but as ... me." He didn't say anything back. He didn't need to. She felt the answer in the way he held her, careful, warm, steady. For the first time, her body rested without fear, and in the middle of a ruined world, under a broken roof, her heart finally began to beat like it belonged to someone free. The sky was blue again. It wasn't bright, but it was enough. The two of them stood on a grassy rise just outside the ruins. Plants had begun to grow where machines had once ruled. Broken metal lay half buried beneath green patches. Birds sang. In the distance, a sound she had forgotten could exist. They had walked for 2 days, stopping only when they needed rest. No more slavers. No more voices behind them. Just wind, sunlight, and space. He carried the supplies. She carried the silence, but not the kind that came from fear. This was something softer, like peace. They found an old service hut near the edge of a long-abandoned farming field. The door creaked when he pushed it open. Inside was dust, broken crates, and faded tools. But the roof was strong, and the walls still stood. It was enough. He dropped his bag, looked around, and said, "We'll fix it." She raised a brow. You live here now too, don't you?" Her heart jumped. She looked around the place. It was small, empty, but for the first time in her life, it was hers. That night, he built a fire in the corner using dry wood and scrap from old shelves. She placed stones around it like a proper hearth. She even laughed once, a short, surprised laugh when a rat jumped from the drawer and ran straight into the wall. He chuckled too. They sat by the fire, sharing a warm meal, shoulders almost touching. He reached into his bag and pulled out something small, a piece of old wood, carved and sanded smooth. On its surface, burned into the grain, was a single word. She took it with careful hands. Her fingers brushed the letters. She looked up. "What is this?" "A name," he said. "For you." Her lips parted. "A real one." He nodded. "I thought. I didn't deserve one. You deserve more than just a name." She stared at it again, her throat tight. The letters were simple, but they meant something more than sound. They meant she belonged to herself now. She whispered it under her breath, then again, louder, her name, like the name he had chosen for her, the name she could finally keep. She set the wood tag down carefully and moved closer to him. "I don't have anything to give you," she said. "Not food, not gold, not power, but if you let me, I want to stay." He didn't speak. He just opened his arms. She stepped in, rested her head on his chest, wrapped her arms around him tightly. Not because she was scared, not because she needed shelter, but because she finally wanted to be held. She gave him everything in that moment, not her body, but her choice, her trust, her loyalty. That night, they didn't lie apart. They lay together, heart to heart. In the soft glow of firelight, she fell asleep, smiling. He stayed awake a little longer, watching the flames flicker. He had seen war, betrayal, hunger, but this girl, who once offered herself for food, now safe in his arms, this was something worth fighting for. And somewhere in the night, without saying the words, they both knew, ... they were no longer two lost souls. They were home together.